Catchment Combos with Thriving Southland, your link to Southland catchment groups and their impactful projects. Each episode will dive into grassroots effort by local farmers and communities that are driving change and sustainability in our regions. Listen in for inspiring stories and insight. Real people, real change, the Southland way.
Welcome back to Catchment Combos. My name is Sarah Thorne and I'm your host today. I'm one of the Thriving Southland Catchment Coordinators. In today's episode, we're starting the conversation on animal pest control, which is a hot topic for many of our catchment groups. Today, I'm joined by Peter McDonald, a sheep farmer from Caroline Valley, former Environment Southland councillor, Dipton local born and bred, and a family man involved in lots of local groups and committees, one of which is the Greater Dipton Catchment Group. Peter and his family fulfilled a family dream in 2025 of protecting 56 hectares of their farm in perpetuity through a QE2 covenant, involving a 4.3 kilometre deer exclusion fence and a lot of hard work removing animal pests by family, friends and the wider community. Often the pest control conversation starts in catchment groups because of damage to paddocks, fences and livestock. But for many catchment group members, seeing their native bush box and tussock lands being damaged is devastating too. In many parts of New Zealand, feral ungulates and possum numbers are on the rise. Feral ungulates are pests with hooves, like pigs, deer and goat. All these pests cause a huge amount of damage to our land and water and can help spread diseases and kill livestock too. Pigs expose large areas of paddocks through rooting. Possums, deer and goats strip our bush areas bare, killing plants and damaging our land's ability to be a sponge, which helps reduce flooding downstream. Mobs of feral deer are very good at traipsing well-worn paths through the bush and creating muddy wallows, allowing more sediment into our streams, damaging our freshwater, estuarine and coastal areas too. For many catchment groups, pest control is an important first step in their work to look after their land and water. So let's get into it. Welcome, Peter. It's really great to have you here to talk about all the work you've done to look after your special part of Southland. I know it's been a huge family effort, spearheaded by you and your lovely wife, Kim, and it's wonderful that you were able to join us today and talk about it.
That's no problem. G'day, Sarah.
Would you like to tell me a bit about your farm and what got you into animal pest control?
I've sort of been here all my life on the place, born and raised on the farm. And, just growing up, it was about the possums and the possum skins. We used to do that as youngsters. It was just your everyday sort of rural kid. So been on the farm, we've been running it ourselves since 1997, but my parents moved here in 1964. The place is pretty, 20% is cultivatable area and 80% is hill country, and about 135 hectares of solid bush and scrub. Pretty challenging sort of hill country. That's always been the case with the farm. So we've had to do things a bit differently over the years. But it's fair to say those forested areas, when I was a younger farmer and was thinking about production and how am I going to do this and how am I going to make more of that, I used to get a bit frustrated about those areas and wished I could have the big wide open spaces of the big paddocks. But as I've got a bit older, I've mellowed a wee bit and started to see the value in those areas. That's probably been my latest sort of thing that we've been on for quite some time, probably the last 10 or 20 years.
I was lucky enough the other week to come to your beautiful farm and go to a really good field day where you opened your Gavin Covenant. And that's been something that you've been working on for a few years.
Yeah, it has been, but it's not the first. The first we did a covenant, a 17 hectare one, so that's up there. But even way before that, a history of fencing off those thick scrub and bush areas. First, we did it in the 1980s, and for many years, people would come up and they would think, "Oh wow, you've done all this environmental stuff," and it was a bit for that too. But mostly, it was to keep the stock out of the bushed areas, especially cattle. So we've had that history of those blocks being left alone and being protected. But the last one we've just completed is a 56 hectare covenant. And it's just got registered now. And the special thing about that it's got a full high-grade deer fence right around the 56 hectares. what actually drove that project is that we first tried for some environmental enhancement fund from Environment Southland to put some plantings in that block. We're going to put a hectare in it just to fill up a few gaps in it. And I just knew that we would probably have quite a bit of deer damage, and I just didn't want to go down that track. So we actually got turned down from that fund, and it was actually a blessing in disguise. So it shifted our thinking around protecting the area around the fence. So what we did after that, we worked in conjunction with QE2 and the local rep down here, Jesse. And what we did is that they had Brian Rance, the long-term ecologist from DOC. Brian started to do some work for QE2. So we got Brian along and Chris Stowe, a well-known ecologist, botanist from Riverton, and they compiled a report, high-value assessment report on that area. They found is that in that 56 hectare, there was such a concentration of locally and nationally endangered plants that was a real driver for the funding. So as soon as we had that information, and the recommendation of those two people was it's completely feasible to put a deer fence around it through QE2. We got the normal QE2 funding for the fencing, and then we got a deer fencing funding package on top of that. We also got funding from Environment Southland. It was secondary, a lot of funding, but really well appreciated. And then myself did the rest with a few contributions from the neighbours on the boundary. The whole project, I think, came in just about $123,000 for that fencing, 4.12 kilometres. It was quite a big project. Brett Middleton, fencing contractor from Otapiri, fenced it. And, Brent does a fantastic job. I just love working with experts, people that know what they're doing. And that's one thing I've learned is to trust people. And just before I finish on the fence is what you call a high-grade deer fence. So there's 6-inch posts at 5 metres. We did quite a lot of what you could say vegetation clearance on that fence because we're really aware if you don't do that, you'll have debris on the fence within a year or so. And as most farmers will know, on sort of harder hill country, access is the key to maintaining a fence. There's also what I was told early on the piece, I have a legal obligation to maintain that fence indefinitely. So that's stuck in my mind that everything is about the future. That's the key part. I've always sort of believed if we get that fence, make a good job of it, the rest will take care of itself.
That's really special. You've given us some great bits of advice already. Any pieces of advice for people starting out on this journey?
I would say know what you have, but go back to that high value assessment. If you think you've got something special that you want to protect, understand what it is. And you'd be surprised what sort of funding could be out there to drive a project. But it was a big commitment for us too, financially. And sometimes you do things you're not really too sure what the end game's going to be, but this was the time that we had to do it. Another thing that you may ask, but I'll just preempt this question, is the pest control part of it. People ask, well, why did you put a deer fence around? And that was obviously to keep the deer out. So we had a major problem. We're on the Hokanuis, and the Hokanuis is one of the largest fallow deer concentration in the country. That's a big statement to make, but that's what evidence sort of shows us anyway. Fallow are an animal that gets set into a place, will stay there unless they're pushed out for any reason. So that was a big factor for us to recognise and start to do something about that. To be honest, the deer issue over the years, I sort of started off, I thought it was quite good to have some hunters up here. We had a trophy operation for many years, but the money we're making off that, we're losing it out the other end with a lot of deer all over the farm. They were just getting away on us. So learned a lot of lessons on that. But then again, that wasn't new to us. We've gone back through the 1990s when we had a massive goat problem. too. And that took us a whole decade to get our heads around that and to learn how to control goats. So that was a big lesson to learn, and that was around coordination with neighbours. It's no point just a couple of neighbours really pulling out all the stops to do a lot of work, because the blocks just get reinfested again. But once you have a coordinated effort amongst everybody, that is the absolute key. So we took those lessons away through into the deer control program.
That's a really good point to make. You've got to work with your neighbours to solve this
You
animal
do.
pest problem.
You absolutely do. One of the big takeaway points is that when you think you've done enough when it comes to animal control, you have to do more. And the doing the more bit is really hard. I still think recreation is important, but we've got to get those numbers down to an acceptable level.
You've got it down to 4 fallow deer in that 56.
Within that 56 hectares, yes, what we did is that we flew a thermal drone called Jarks, came from Doc. So he brought it out one night and we identified 12 deer. We had funding from QE2 also for deer eradication, and we used a helicopter for that. Fraser Sutherland from Tiana got a helicopter and he's got the night vision gear attached to that. So they spent 2.5 hours, and it's all GPS tracked up there, and they got 10. And Fraser just sort of said at the end, we're pretty certain we're chasing around the last 5. He reckons there's 4 or 5 left there. So since that, we've shot 3 from the ground, and I think there's about another 3 or 4 left between me and my neighbour.
Amazing. And I know that you poured your heart and soul into this, really, your family. And that's one of the wonderful things, isn't it? Because you guys have all worked together on it and you've secured future access to the site, haven't you?
Yeah, that's probably one thing that I haven't mentioned through all this. We've had a large change around of ownership. We've sold a large block that the track goes through. So we've created an easement. We're still farming on the flat land here, but we've sold a large block there, and that's in trees. And so we've secured that easement and also a right of way around the fence. So that was really important, a 4-metre right of way. I wanted to make sure I could get down there with a tractor and a thumper and put another post in if I had to. So we've secured that easement for the family and for anyone else.
My next question. I mean, I don't think this is going to end. You're so invested in this project and your family are. What are your future plans? I know you've got an interest in biodiversity credits and the carbon credits as well. And
yes, we have. So the first thing I would like to do, and we've done this already, is get a benchmark or a stock take of what is in the forest. So we've started on that. And we've already put in some 20 by 20 squared area plot, just with aluminium stakes to look at regeneration. So I'm really keen to see what biomass is there. So we understand what's there now. So in the future, we got something to measure against. I'd like to put in some sort of perimeter possum bait stations. And I understand that being a covenant, I will get those for free. I think that's still the deal with the council. I'm not too sure, but I'll probably put in quite a few more to create some sort of perimeter. And then there's wild cats up there. I know that wild cats everywhere. Give them a bit of a tickle up. At some stage, everything I'm going to do, I'm going to document. The credits, everyone's talking about them arriving. They haven't quite arrived in a usable form, I could say, or off the shelf sort of turnkey yet. But I'm pretty confident that will happen, and I want to be ready for when that does happen to have all that information there. So we'll be doing all that groundwork as we go on.
Pete, thank you so much for talking to me today. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, look, not really. I covered a lot of things, but I would just go back to those key points around pest control is coordination with neighbours. So coordination with them, and you need to go further. So when you think you've done it about right, you need to go further. That's all I can say. And one thing I'll always remember when we took our first 150, it was 175 out in our first helicopter shoot. I went up the hill about a week later and there was just something different about it. It was like the whole land sort of let out a sigh of relief. It just looked and felt a bit different. Animals come and go, and this might sound a bit ruthless, but always look after your land. That's the most important thing, because if you treat that poorly, it'll treat you very poorly.
Well, thank you so much, Pete, for joining me today and for sharing your family's experiences and dedication to looking after their special part of Southland. And I love that you've arranged ongoing access to your special place for generations to come.
Thanks, Sarah.
And that's a wrap for another episode of Catchment Combos, brought to you by Thriving Southland. A big thanks to our guests for being a part of the conversation on today's episode, and for you guys for tuning in. We appreciate your support. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us wherever you get your podcast from so you can stay up to date with all the latest episodes as they're released. For more information on this episode, check out the show notes or head to the Thriving Southland website, where you can also learn more about the awesome work happening across the catchment groups here in Southland. And if you've got a project or an idea you want to share, don't be shy, reach out. So until next time, keep up the good work out there on the land, and as always, stay connected and keep driving those changes for a thriving Southland.